My name's Leo and I'm a boat builder and a sailor, and I'm on a mission to rebuild and restore this 110-year-old classic sailing yacht, Tally-Ho. Last week I moved the beam shelves into the boat and started bending them into place, and this week I'm hoping to do the last and hardest part of the bending process, twisting them into their final shape. At the moment, the huge spring and tension in these beams is pulling the frames together further aft, and it's pushing them too far apart right at the front of the boat. So I've got a new toy. This hydraulic ram setup, which you can see here, was actually sent to me by a fan. Thank you very much. It couldn't have come at a better time. And I also made up some L-shaped blocks which I can clamp to the beam shelf. They help me position the ram properly, and I'm also able to put a wedge in there and it will hold that in position. So now I'm twisting the stern part of the beam shelf into its final position. And although this is less dramatic than pulling the bow section in and pulling that big curve into it, this is actually the more risky and more stressful part of the operation. In this stern area of the boat, the beam has to bend, it has to edge set, and most of all it has to twist a lot in quite a short space. Alright, so I just got these boxes back in the mail, and they've come back from Keith Rucker. This is the parts for the threading machine. I sent them to Keith a week or two ago, and he very kindly has done some work and brazed together the broken piece of the threading machine. So let's have a look at it now. So in this box should be the rails. Now I mainly sent these to Keith just so he could make sure that the new bushing was the right size, but he did say he put them in the lathe and just took off some of the high spots. These rails are pretty worn, but they should be fine for a while. It looks like Keith has very efficiently reused my 2x4s that I use for packing. A couple of very nice stickers there from Keith. So there we go. This piece was broken right here. This bit had snapped off, and Keith has done a really nice job brazing this back together. You can see the joint here, and he's also fitted new bushings to both sides of this where this piece rides along the rails. Alright, let's get this installed, check it all fits, and hopefully thread some bolts.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
Well, Keith's repair on the threading machine, the pipe threader, has worked really well. As you can see, it's operating really smoothly. There's a lot less slop in this whole assembly now. He did say it might be worth thinking about replacing the rails because they're so worn. I don't think I'm going to do that right now, but maybe at some point. I don't think it's going to cause any issues with the machine though. So really big thanks to Keith for doing that, for helping me out with this machine. He's now released 2 videos on the process he went through to repair this part. They're both on his YouTube channel, which is Vintage Machinery with Keith Rucker. There'll be a link to his channel in the description below this video, and I highly recommend that you head on over there and check out how he repaired this piece, but also check out his other really interesting metalwork and vintage machinery work. He has a fantastic depth of knowledge, and he explains the processes he's going through very clearly. It's really interesting to watch. So I've been trying to thread some bolts to bolt the front of the 2 beam shelves together, and it is working. I have managed to thread both ends of this 3/4 inch bronze bolt, but as you can see, it's been slipping in the machine, and that's what all these marks are in the middle of the bolt. So what's actually happening here is that the 3/4 inch cutter for this machine is very blunt. It's very old, it's damaged, it's actually missing quite a few teeth. I didn't have an alternative today, so I tried using it and I found I was able to make it work, but I actually had to do 3 or 4 passes, adjusting the teeth to cut a little bit deeper on each pass. So it basically took me probably 4 times longer than it should have taken, and as I was working that out, the bolt jams and then the chuck keeps on turning. Now, unfortunately, one of my microphones must have broken last week, the one which sits on top of the camera, but I didn't actually realise that until I started editing this video. So a lot of the clips, mostly the ones where I'm working, don't have any audio. In this clip I was also using that microphone, and I have no idea really what I was going on about here. Probably just some boring rubbish about how I sharpened these cutting dies, and I don't know if they're going to work or not. So I'm very pleased. I was worried that the dies weren't working because of their broken teeth and that maybe they would never work. But after a bit of trial and error and a bit of research, I figured out how to sharpen the dies, and having sharpened them, they're cutting much better. Just in one pass, they're cutting this pretty perfect thread. So after all that work and plenty of work by Keith and Marshall, this machine is finally operating as good as I could ever have hoped it would. I've learned quite a bit in the process, not least how to sharpen dies. Now these bolts are to hold the front of the beam shelves together. They're pretty heavy duty for that, but I didn't have any 5/8 bar in stock here, and I felt like 1/2 inch was a bit too light. There was a lot of tension on the very front ends of the beam shelves, trying to pull them away from each other, and silicon bronze, which this is, can stretch a little bit, so I want to make sure that they are way over strength and they can hold that joint together and prevent it from coming apart and pushing the frames apart in the bow there. So the beam shelves are in their final position, forward and aft, and they didn't break as they went in, which, as you can imagine, I'm very pleased about. Now, of course, I have to think about fastening them, and the first fastenings through the beam shelf are going to be roughly 7-inch long bronze bolts with the nut countersunk into the outside of the frame, but I do want them to have a domed head on the inside to match the rest of the rivets, especially because the beam shelf is quite an obvious and prominent feature throughout the inside of the boat. They're going to be 3/8 bronze, partly because that's what I've got in stock, so I've got to figure out a way of hammering a head onto those and cutting a thread into them on the other end. So this little jig I set up for hammering heads onto bronze rod has worked fairly well. It's silicon bronze, so it is mostly copper, but with some other stuff in there too. But it's quite a bit harder than copper, so hammering a head onto the end of this actually takes a lot of work. So next I'm going to try doing the same thing, but with some heat. Okay, so now I have a head on my bolt and I need to cut the threads onto the other end. Now I've got a pipe threading machine, of course, and I've got quite a few of these different cutting dies, but unfortunately I do not have a 3/8 bolt die which would cut the right thread on this bolt. What I do have though is a regular die for 3/8 coarse thread, which is what I want, and it fits in this die handle. But I tried threading one of these and it's really time consuming, it's really slow, it's quite difficult to get a nice thread using this handle on this bronze rod. So what I need to do is try and figure out a way of mounting this die on this machine so I can use this machine and the lubrication to cut the threads much faster. Now, I'm going to warn you guys that my metalworking is not very good yet, still learning, so don't judge me on my welding, but I've got an idea for a jig which might work. It's going to be purely functional, so it's probably not going to look very pretty, but I'm going to try and throw it together quickly because I don't want to waste too much time on it if it doesn't work. So now I'm going to attempt to weld the socket to the steel plate. Now I am aware that the socket is probably chrome vanadium steel, and so I should probably be using some kind of special wire and some special settings on my welder. I don't really understand the metallurgy, so I'm just going to give it a shot with what I've got because it's all I've got right now, and there's going to be a large surface area to weld and not a huge amount of torque on this piece. I'm hoping it's going to be okay, but if it breaks it's not really the end of the world. So last week I shared with you guys the really exciting news that thanks to all of your generosity and support, I think I can now afford to hire a shipwright to come and help me move things along a bit faster. Now I don't feel like I've got that much done in the last week, but I have been spending quite a lot of time phoning around, talking to different shipwrights, and the good news is I think I found someone who's going to be a really good match for the project. I know he's a very hard worker and very skilled, and so he's going to be starting in just a few days, and we're going to work together for a couple of weeks and see how it goes. Again, I'm full of gratitude to you guys for enabling me to take this step. And I want to reassure everyone that finishing the boat faster doesn't mean the end of this project or the end of this channel. A boat is never finished, and so one day I hope to document, of course, the launch of Tally Ho, but also her subsequent sailing adventures and her maintenance and whatever comes after that. Anyway, that's all we've got time for right now. So thanks a lot for watching, and a massive thank you to everyone who's donated or otherwise supported the Tally Ho project. It does make a huge difference, and it also means I'm able to take the time to make and edit these videos, so I really appreciate it. I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.